Today, I have the gorgeous Celeste Palmer on the Awaken Feminine podcast. She's currently in Mexico, so she's joining me all the way from Mexico. Welcome to the show, Celeste.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled and happy to be here and really grateful as well. So thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited for our conversation. And Celeste is one of our co-authors in the Awaken Feminine book version. So super excited to talk to her. Such a beautiful soul. So Celeste, before we get started, I'd love you to do a quick introduction of for our audience to just, give them a taste of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm Celeste, and I am I would say that I am a seeker and a leader as well, and my mission and purpose here is to help and support others on their journey of healing and awakening and transformation. And so more specifically and practically speaking, I am a trauma-informed integrated breakthrough coach and a 𝘮𝘰𝘮 or healer and shaman of traditional medicine of the Amazonian region. And so I work with the unconscious mind, or in the world and realms of shadow, to help others integrate the fragmented pieces of the self and to dissolve and release disempowering fear programs, limiting belief systems, stuck trauma, stuck emotion, so that others, as well as myself, can greater embody our higher truth, our higher purpose, our divine truth, and greater embody our sovereignty.
I love what you do, and I'm so curious about your story. So we'll dive into that soon. But I always like to ask my guests this question before we dive right in, and that's, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
I love this question, and I've heard you ask it before, and so it got me thinking. And I thought, what is it? Because I use that terminology myself, and so it gave me an opportunity to get clear on what it means for me. And really, an awakened feminine is a woman who has awoken to her heart's desire, and then gone even beyond that, and is taking necessary steps and action to really follow her heart's desire and her truth, so that she can live a more meaningful, joyful, purpose-driven life.
I love that. I've got tingles going on. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking.
So Celeste, I really want to dive into your journey, because just before we hit record, I was like, oh, I want to talk about, this particular part about your journey. But I said, let's see what Spirit wants us to talk about. So we'll be guided by that. But what I really like you to start off with is, can you share with us your journey of how you started doing the work that you're doing, that, you help people trauma-informed coach, and you're a shaman? Like, how did that path, that road look like to get to where you are now?
Yeah. Oh man. So, oh goodness gracious. As you were asking that, it's funny because, before I really awakened to my higher purpose and my calling, I had a lot of confusion. Like I had a yearning. There was a void inside of me, and a knowing, a real deep knowing that I was here for the life that I was living wasn't meant for me, that there was something more, but I had no idea what it was. And I remember speaking to one of my dear sisters on the phone, and at the time I was bartending, actually, and I was like, I think I want to be a shaman. And I had I didn't even know what a shaman was. I just had recently been turned on to the world of shamanism through different forms of like ceremony and working with the elements and working with smoke and fire and drums and feathers. There was just some sort of resonance when I saw photos or heard the language. And I remember that conversation vividly. But even before that, when I was 9 years old, my twin sister, Caitlin, was diagnosed with leukemia, a cancer of the blood. And it's actually a common, unfortunately, it's quite a common dis-ease. And then when we were 13 years old, she had passed away. And so at that time, I really sort of shut down, like my spirit really, a part of me died with my sister. And life continues to move on the way that it does. And as I got older, I really started to rebel. I think as a way to probably numb some of the really deep, heavy sadness that I was experiencing from her loss. And then when I was 21, 22, I got into a relationship with my partner, whom would later become my husband, and then eventually my ex-husband as well. And I moved to Texas, and I really, again, I didn't have a clear understanding of who I was or what I wanted. And I essentially, like, after my sister passed away, I like fell asleep. And so I was just kind of like, going through the motions the way most of us are, a lot of us are, until we're not. And so I followed him to Texas, and I started bartending, which was a really fun and exciting job until it wasn't. And I remember I had a lot of regulars, and the bar that I worked at was a bar where there was lots of regulars. So my regulars our patrons were our friends. And there were a few people in particular where I just remember like watching them get really, dependent, and this was no longer a fun thing. It was a dependency, and it was a poison. And I realized that I was contributing to the dis-ease and the killing and the death of these people. And so my partner at the time, he really, because I was working late nights, like I would go into work at 7, I would get home at 4 a.m. I was working probably like 75 to 80 hours a week, sometimes multiple bars every day of the week. It was just like really hard work. And he encouraged me to transition into a 9-to-5 corporate American job. And so I was working, selling software for a tech company, which every time I talk about that, I just think it's hilarious, because I'm like, what was I thinking? That is not me at all. And I hated it. I knew it. I hated it. But it was good experience, and it was absolutely part of my journey to awakening. But eventually he and we had a lot of friction in our relationship. Astrologically speaking, our charts were just like a big red square. We were just lots of conflicting tension energy. And so we decided to end the relationship, the marriage. And I remember showing up at my 9-to-5 job after that. And I was like, and after the relationship, I had no idea who I was. I recognized in that moment how caught up I was in his world. I had completely sacrificed my own dreams and desires for his. I was just living for him. And I had this moment where I walked into work at my 9-to-5 job, and it was like a stifling of energy. My energy just went whoosh. It was a really visceral experience. And I just knew in that moment, I was like, if I don't quit my job now, I might never get out of this. And so that was the knowing that I had. And then I made an inner commitment to, I decided, I was like, I'm going to quit. I don't know how I'm going to quit, but I'm going to quit. And it was in that decision that a series of things started to shift. I had a couple of big deals come into my pipeline. And then I think it was within like 2 months, I put in my 2-week notice. And I decided that I was going to just travel. I didn't know what I was going to do. But travel was the one thing that I had desired since I was a little girl. And so I thought, if I don't do it now, like there's nothing holding me back, then I might never do it. Yeah. And then eventually, that was when I landed at my first ayahuasca retreat. Was about 3 months into my travels, which was another series of divinely orchestrated events. And when I arrived at this retreat, I was really lost. Like, although I was traveling, I was really, I remember looking back and like, there was just this dullness and like this sadness within me. And it prevented me from really being able to live and or connect with that life force energy, you know. And so I knew a little bit about ayahuasca, but I didn't know much about ayahuasca, and it had kind of been in the peripheral of my mind. And right before I left Texas, right before I quit my job and I broke my lease and I sold all my things, I met a gentleman who, he had these scars on his arm, which was the scars from a frog venom known as 𝘂𝐿𝐵 or 𝘂𝐵. And it's a purgatory. And so it opens the heart, but it also helps you to clean your stomach and kind of like reset the nervous system. It's really intense. But we started talking and he told me how he went to Peru and he was doing all this shamanic work and he had worked with ayahuasca and it changed his life. And that was the second time that I had heard of ayahuasca. And I had actually almost gone to an ayahuasca retreat, or just a single ceremony with my ex-husband in Costa Rica. And we were on our way to the retreat, but the GPS started malfunctioning and then we got lost. And then when we got back on track, we hit traffic. And so it was just like really rushed and it didn't feel aligned. And we decided last minute, we were 45 minutes away and we decided we're not going to go. And so a couple years later, again, when I was leaving Austin, Texas, this man came in and he said ayahuasca, and my whole body just lit up. And I knew, I was like, it's time. Yeah.
Wow. I'm just listening, going, tell me more. Just your journey. I mean, I started tearing up when you were talking about your sister, and you know, to feel like, you know, because twins, you guys have a special bond too. Is like, that part leaving you and then, you know, just shutting down everything until then. Now, when you've well, this part of the journey where you got up to, where you're like trying to find yourself again from all the things, and just listening to you talk about, you know, you didn't even know who you were because you were so caught up in your ex-husband's world. And I think a lot of women actually, you know, when we get married or actually, you know, get involved in a relationship, we do tend to do that because I think women tend to nurture, and we've got this nurturing nurture to us. That's just our feminine energy. And we tend to just serve and please, right? And then we forget who we are. So yeah, it's just a reminder for all the women listening that to, you know, really remember and come home to who you are, because yeah, it's so important that we don't lose ourselves in our relationships. And especially, like, you know, I'm a mum, losing your identity, like losing my identity when I had children. I was like, whoa, what just happened? And it was because I was awakening that I knew that. But if I didn't awaken and I continued, like you say, most of us are asleep until we're awake. we just keep going down that path of not knowing who we are. Now, I want to ask about ayahuasca.
Okay.
I haven't had a guest that's talked to me about ayahuasca, and I'm so fascinated with it. And because the first time I heard about it was actually when I was doing a certification with my mentor, and I was like, oh, this sounds really cool, but also really scary, because I was like, oh, like the experiences that you have. And, you know, I have then kind of done research and find out, you know, other people's experiences and things. But first of all, actually, I want to ask you about that divine orchestration of you actually finding this retreat that, you know, where you had your first ayahuasca experience, because I think, like you said before, the first time you didn't quite work out. You were like, okay, the GPS has gone wonky. We're not meant to go. And I feel like ayahuasca is one of those things that you experience when you, like you say, when you're ready.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny looking back on when I was on my way to that ceremony in Costa Rica and the GPS was going wonky, because we were really like pushing up against that, and we started to rush, and then our energy got a little bit chaotic. But it was no mistake. I wasn't supposed to go to that retreat, absolutely. And it wasn't even a retreat, it was a single ceremony. And I know now why. I knew as soon as I sat it was my third ceremony at the retreat that I did end up at a few years later in Europe. And it was because the shaman leading that ceremony was my teacher. And it was very clear to me. And so I remember, so this was when I was still married, and my partner and I, we were planning to go to Costa Rica, and one of my colleagues at the corporate job, he was like, oh, are you going to do that like ayahuasca stuff? And I was like, ayahuasca. I didn't know what it was. And then a couple days later, my partner was like, hey, I found this thing. I think we should do it. And I was like, that's funny. Somebody else brought it up. And that was in 2016 or 2016. And then it wasn't until 2018 where I actually arrived. And so right before I had made the decision to quit my job to just start, I was like, I got to figure out why I'm here. It was really like an inner pulling, like my heart, my higher self. It was absolutely divinely orchestrated. And I was being summoned to rise up and to heal. And that was the first step, was to heal, right? But I didn't even realize that. And so that gentleman came out of the yoga practice, and we just started randomly talking. It was a really organic, again, divinely orchestrated encounter. And I mentioned I would be in Europe. I was going to be meeting up with a friend in Europe. And he said, oh, my shaman's going to be in Europe. I'll connect you guys via Facebook. And so he connected us, and we were communicating, and but the timing just didn't align. His plans were really wishy-washy. And so I thought, well, if he's offering medicine in Europe, somebody else must be too. And so I found this place. It was called 𝘂𝐴₄ And I happened at that time, I was actually in Mexico at an Airbnb at the very beginning of my travels. And I was practicing yoga at a yoga studio called 𝘂𝐴₄ in Todos Santos. So there was another alignment there. And I saw the photo of the shaman. I could have done a lot more research, but I didn't. And I'm glad that I didn't, although I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everybody, because not everybody is serving this medicine with integrity and in alignment with purity and of the light. And so that is something to be mindful of and consider when embarking on this medicine walk. And so, but it worked out, and I arrived at the retreat, and I had signed up for a week. and which would be 3 ceremonies. But at the end of my retreat, I had about a week gap before my flight back west. So I was in Europe and I was heading back west for the holidays. And so I was like, I'm kind of sick of traveling by myself. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I reached out to them. I saw they had another retreat and I reached out, hey, do you have space at the second week? And they said, yeah. So I ended up signing up for 2 weeks. And when I arrived at the retreat, my intention was like, why am I here? Like, what's my purpose? I wanted to connect with my spirit animals. I wanted to connect with my purpose. And I wanted to connect with my deceased loved ones, my father, my sister, and maybe my grandparents. I wasn't like super set on that one, but it was really my sister and my father that I wanted to connect with. And so I didn't even show up for healing. I didn't know I needed healing. I didn't even realize that I was traumatized, because the association and the definition of trauma that I had heard based on society was like war, physical violence, sexual abuse, things like that, which are all terrible. But I didn't experience any of those things. So it didn't even cross my mind that I was carrying trauma. And it was in my ceremony. Well, it wasn't even necessarily in my ceremonies. It was like when life continued, the ceremonies ended, and all of a sudden I am like, my core wounds are being activated. And I was in the perfect environment to, again, trigger and activate me. So my wounds awokened before I did. Mm. And it was like my inner child, my little girl who, didn't feel like she was seen or heard or couldn't be seen, because my sister really, she needed attention and she needed energy. And even as a child, I recognized that consciously, but unconsciously, I registered it as, I have to dim my light. My sister is sick. She can't play soccer the way that I can play. And so I had to start like dimming my light in order to keep, just to be nice, I guess, and to not outshine. And so I unconsciously started to develop those patterns. And suddenly I start working with ayahuasca, and the healing that I didn't even know that I needed began. And so this is really the nature of the medicine. And we can even, I say this often because I think it's important, and it really illuminates, it kind of brings a deeper understanding to the nature of the medicine. But ayahuasca grows native to the equator. It grows native to the Amazon. And so we can, if we don't look at anything else, if all we look at is the location in which this vine, it's a beautiful vine. And when you cut it open, the inside looks like a flower. And so it has a real feminine energy, even if you're just looking at like the anatomy of the vine itself. And so ayahuasca, it grows native to the equator, which is equal parts day and night. And this is the nature of the medicine. It is equal parts beauty and bliss and magic, and it is just as much shadow. And so ayahuasca illuminates both, and it illuminates our higher purpose, our light, why we're here, why we were intended and created by the Creator. We can illuminate our purpose, our highest expression can be illuminated in that way, and our lowest expression, everything that is preventing us from embodying our light. And so we got to start dissolving and releasing and purging and letting go. And it's both and, right? It's both and. Letting go and releasing everything that's in opposition, everything that we are or we're carrying around or we're holding it onto that's in opposition to the embodiment of our highest self, our magnificence, our radiance, as well as understanding what our potential is so that we can align ourselves with that vision.
Wow. I want to ask you, so did you get your answer when you had your first ayahuasca experience?
It was my third ceremony. And you know, ayahuasca really works with everybody very personally. So I even want to like tread lightly when I share about my experiences, because everybody's experiences are really different. And my first ceremony, it was really, I had a hard time connecting during my first ceremony. And when I did connect, it was really heavy. And I do remember, I saw like a glimpse of myself in that ceremony. And I just was like, I was really standing in my power. And that's really all that I can say about it. It was just like an image of me really standing in my power. And then the rest of it, there was a lot of like memories that came up and some guilt in the way that I had acted and done things. And so there was a lot of like heaviness that was being revealed and then released. And I came out of that experience and I remember saying to the facilitator, like, I feel really discombobulated. Is that normal? And he said to me, yep, everything's perfectly fine. You're healing. And I went to bed, and that night, every 30 minutes, I was getting up to go to the bathroom, and I had diarrhea throughout the entire night. And I was really doing some intense physical cleaning out and purging in that way. Ayahuasca, physically, it cleans the intestinal tract and the gut of bacteria, bugs, and parasites and things. And so I was doing a deep cleaning there. And then it was the third ceremony where I remember, I mean, it was fascinating. I remember I was like really deep, and there was a period of time where it was like 15, it felt like a very long time. I don't know how long it really was, but of total silence, no 𝘂𝐞𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐭𝐞 which are sacred medicine songs the shaman will sing to facilitate a journey. But I was like, it was as if the shaman, I understood what space holding was in that moment. It was like we were each in our own bubble, and then there was one big bubble, and the shaman was just kind of like holding us and holding space. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to hold space and to be held in space. It was like a real visceral experience. And like a deep inner standing. And then later in the ceremony, I just remember it was very clear, like he was I was invited into the jungle and he was my teacher. And I remember just like in the dark, practically like bowing and saying, thank you, thank you. That was another intention, like, show me my teachers, like I'm here, like who can help guide me on my path forward. And so it was revealed in that ceremony that he was a teacher for me. And then later in that ceremony, as soon as I understood that, the medicine took me forward. And I don't know how far in time, it was symbolic of my future. And so I was an old woman with gray hair and wrinkly lips, and I was singing the sacred medicine songs of La Selva in ceremony, leading as shaman. And it was just so beautiful. Yeah. I was like, yes!
I've got full tingles going on here. Wow. That is so amazing.
It was profound. Yeah. I just remember, and I was so excited. Like I was so humbled, and I was like, me? Like what? You know, but it made sense. Not logical sense, but like cellular sense. It just, I knew it.
Yeah.
As truth.
Yeah.
And then there's the And this is another thing that's important to understand when working with ayahuasca is nothing's guaranteed. Like just because you get the vision, this is a really collaborative experience and plant ally. And the vision means nothing unless we do something with it. Mm-hmm. And that's why a lot of people talk about ayahuasca and they're like, some people arrive in desperation, and that can be a good thing. And it can also be a disempowering thing because it's the victim mentality. Like this medicine's going to fix me. And it's only partially true because this medicine can't do anything without our permission and without our allowance and without our active participation.
Mm. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, so did you know, what was the question? It's more like, so because it was your third ceremony where you realized what your high purpose is and you found your teacher. But prior to that, you had that conversation with your best friend about, I want to be a shaman. And was that desire still really strong throughout this experience until you got to your third ceremony where you're like, yeah, that's why?
I honestly forgot about that conversation with my friend until even a couple of years. It was almost like only within like the last year and a half where I remembered that conversation. So no. I didn't know I knew that I wanted to like work with people, and even kind of like the conversation around like, I think I want to be a shaman. I also remember thinking I want to be a coach, but I didn't really know what that meant or how to do it. I was still really entangled and deep in my, in the matrix, really. Limitation, like the security and dependency upon these larger companies who are able to support me financially and make sure my resources and my basic needs are met. I was like really still influenced by society's shoulds and the conditioning and programming. So it was like a real slow, it was just like one seed here, one seed here. And then it was really the divorce that was a shock to my heart. My world flipped upside down. And that's when things started to push me forward. And then it was ceremony where it was another shock to all of me, not just my heart, but like my consciousness. I was like, holy crap, the world that I've been living in has been so small. And then when, in this journey work, it's profound journey work. And I would expand like really into the quantum of possibility. And like, I would tap into like these higher potential timelines. I see them now as timelines, potential timelines, my future self, what's possible. And even as I've started to embark in the integration work, that vision of the old woman whom I was, that was just symbolic because my consciousness at that time when I received that vision, probably wouldn't have believed that I could be shaman sooner than gray hair. And so as I've continued to expand and heal and cultivate different skill sets and grow myself, the timeline has come a lot closer. And so it's like I'm magnetizing myself and pulling that vision in. And sometimes it still feels like a really long way away. But now in hindsight, because I am leading ceremony now, and it came a lot quicker when I received that guidance that it's time for me to lead ceremony. I thought to myself, what? Really? Are you sure? And I had to sit with it for a while to make sure that it was an integrity with the tradition, And ultimately it boiled down to, I received permission directly from the plant. So yeah, and again, when it comes to the collaborative, active participation with this medicine, so I would like go to these far places into the quantum, into higher timelines, and then I would come back, and it was really exciting because I had received this big vision, I was expanded, and then it was daunting. I was like, oh my goodness, like that feels so far away, like there's so much work to be done between now and then. And really that's what it is. It's lento pero seguro, as my teacher says, slow but careful, and one step at a time. But even with that one step, right, everything's already starting to accelerate.
Yeah.
I
love that you mentioned that, ayahuasca is like a tool for us to see our potential timelines, and then actually we need to kind of come back and actually take the actions. And what a great reminder that, just taking those steps, just take those steps and move forward, because we get so stuck in our heads of, oh, how am I going to do this? And we think how, and then we think so much that we're like, oh, it's too hard, we're not going to do it. So it's, but that's what most people do, right? And it's just so important that we just take that first step, dip your feet in the water and see where it takes you, and then keep, dipping further and further in, and it'll take you down this beautiful path. Like, what you're doing, you just kind of follow the seeds and the guidance, and you just kept going. So so becoming a shaman, I would really love to talk a bit about that. So you found your teacher and you started this journey. How long did it take you to then start going to receive that guidance to lead ceremony? And what was that experience like to become a shaman? And maybe can you talk a bit more about what shamans actually do for people that are like, I don't know what they do. It sounds like they do a lot of healing and things like that, but maybe they don't have a deep understanding.
Yeah. So I would say, from my experience, a shaman it's somebody who has walked into their own hell, if you will, walked into their own shadow, and has walked into it and through it and illuminated it and seen it. And there's still always so much to see, to where they have cultivated the understanding, right, and the capacity and the resilience and the trust, and the integrity too, because there's trickery in there. There's a lot of like trickster energy, to where they can then guide and walk with others into their shadow and hold space for them, and make sure that when we're in the shadow that we are protected from that trickery energy, right, of the polarity, the darker entities, or the energetics, the energies, the entities that don't have humanity's highest interest in mind. And so I would say it's somebody who has traversed the shadow and has integrated themselves, so come into greater unity within and wholeness within, and can hold space for others and sit with others in their fire. Because it can be chaotic in there. And so is there somebody, and if I can't, is there somebody that can hold space for me and balance out the chaotic energy with that anchored, grounded energy? And so in my world of shamanism, not everybody works with these like psychedelic plants, if you will, or entheogens, or these substances that might create altered states of consciousness. That is my avenue. And I also implement the shamanic work into my like coaching practice without these, right? So I can kind of see what's in the shadow or outside of the conscious mind, outside of the light, to help other people. So it's illuminating the shadow. If we were to boil it down and make it really, really simple, it's it's being able to illuminate the shadow and see into the shadow. So I kind of see myself as like, and based on some other modalities such as astrology, I see myself, one of the aspects of my blueprint is to carry fire and light into the darkness to illuminate that. So that's what I would say shamanism is. And then as far as my journey to beyond like receiving the vision, in this lineage in which I work in, Amazonian medicine, there's a particular practice. It's a traditional way of learning, and that is to learn directly from the plants. And so it's a practice known as la dieta, or the diet, and where a person who, there's two reasons one would go to diet, and that would be to heal and to learn. They're both happening simultaneously, regardless of the intention, but a primary intention might be, for example, to start to heal. And so in my first series of ceremonies, I saw myself walking in the jungle. And with every step that I was walking barefoot, and as I would walk forward, a flower would grow up out of my footprint and bloom. And I understood that as an invitation to the jungle. And then I had learned about the dieting process from the shaman. And as soon as he talked, I was like, I need to go. Like, this is for me, absolutely. And it's when somebody enters into solitude. And so a traditional diet is somebody is living by themselves in a small casita, a tambito. It's a small little hut. And they are practicing different disciplines, typically through diet. So eating a really neutral, plain, simple diet, for example, rice, plantains, and maybe a white river fish. So neutral, sustaining foods, but not a lot of life force energy not a lot of life force energy. And not communicating or talking with others, not taking in other information or content, not reading books, not listening to music, not exchanging, making eye contact, no sexual activity with self or others, while drinking the medicine or the tea of a master plant teacher. So there's trees, vines, and plants, and each plant or tree or vine, like ayahuasca, carries a unique medicine, which will heal the body in whatever way that plant works, heal the mind and the heart, and then teach you about shamanism or about its medicine or about yourself. And so it's really a process of emptying ourselves. So as you can imagine, when you're living in a hut, not talking to anybody or consuming a lot of food or information or opinions of others or energetic exchange, physical exchange, there's all this space for stuff within the unconscious mind to come forward. And so the plants often work with you physically, but also in the dream state. So the unconscious realm is where things are being reorganized and cleaned of the clutter. And so this is what prepares a person's channel for somebody who is embarking on the path of shamanism, to clean their channel so that their channel is pure, of purity, to where they can now facilitate eventually, right? It's a process, facilitate this medicine, having built relationship with the master plants in which they diet with.
Wow. That's so cool. I was like,
it's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
Going, oh my gosh, this is like next level cool. So to become a shaman, do you you got the vision, but do you then need to be kind of like chosen as such? Because I would think that not everyone can become a shaman if they just wanted to become a shaman, right?
Yeah, well, I think anybody who wanted to become a shaman could be a shaman if they wanted to. And some people do want to be, some people do want to be a shaman, and then they don't do the necessary work in order to really be a shaman of light, and they're still carrying around that's like ego inflation, which can happen with ayahuasca. It can happen with a lot of these different plant medicines. And it's interesting too, because oftentimes the plants will humble you, especially ayahuasca. She'll humble you if need be. And so I would say, yeah, some people do. I think anybody, but not everybody has the call or the desire, right? And then there is the healing work that must be done. And so really, maybe that's the definition of shamanism, is somebody who has healed themselves to a specific degree of purity and integration, to where they can just shine the light, they can see more clearly, and they can shine the light in places where somebody else is disintegrated and where somebody else still needs healing or love even. And so and going into these realms too, I'm not sure that I want to, maybe I do. The word dangerous is coming up, but going into those again, you can get lost in those realms. So it's learning how to walk into the shadow and also come back to the light. It's learning how to walk through the realms.
Yeah. And, when you were talking before, and when you had your third ceremony, the space holding, I think, that would be something that's important for if you are, if ayahuasca or, working with a shaman, if you're listening to this right now, is oh, you want to do this, is making sure, like what Celeste said before, that the shaman is of light and they've done their work so that they can help you, rather than someone going, I want to be a shaman because it sounds cool. Right. Not actually, right. Because there are people out there that are like that. So it's just important to, do your research or trust your instincts to know that that person is the right person for you to work with as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of people, and it is kind of common in the world of ayahuasca, where maybe people receive the vision and but then there's no training or work involved, right? And so especially when working with ayahuasca, has the shaman leading the ceremony, have they done the dieting process? How many diets have they done? How much time have they spent in the dieting process? Because that's when we're bridging a relationship with the plants. So I do use the word healer, but I'm more of a bridge between the person and the medicine or the spirit of these plants. So through the dieting process is when I have cultivated a bridge between myself and the plant. And this is where I've received directly from the plants melodies and songs, sacred medicine songs known as 𝘒𝘞𝐥𝐞𝐤𝐭𝐞. And they carry the frequency of the plant or of the medicine. So this is sound healing. And this is when, and so these are the songs that I sing in ceremony to facilitate the journey and to connect the person with the medicine or the frequency of the medicine through sound. And so I have heard of some ceremonies happening where people are playing playlists and things like that. And that's absolutely not the way that I would go about it or recommend it. The 𝘒𝘞𝐥𝐞𝐤𝐿 also provide so the plants carry the frequency of protection as well. And so it's the 𝘒𝘞𝐥𝐿 that protect the space and that clear the space. Because ayahuasca, it's a purgatory, so it helps us facilitate deep cellular purification. So we're gonna purge, and it might not look like puking, although it usually does, not always, but that's the most common way. It could look like yawning and laughing and releasing heavy emotion, right? It can look like burping, or it can look like many, many things, a spiritual purging, an emotional purging, a psychological purging. So working things out in the psyche, and then the physical purge or emotional. So, there's things that are, like we're getting rid of. That's why we sit in ceremony, is to get rid of things, is to empty ourselves of that which is preventing us from greater embodying our light and our truth, and really owning it. And so if there's not somebody who has undergone the proper training and who has really bridged a relationship with the pharmacy of the earth, of Sophia Gaia, through the dieting process, or just building a relationship with these plants, then there's energy that's being purged, and where is it going? And so the shaman clears it.
I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I want to ask you so many more questions.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even realize.
You'll have to come back another time. It's like we just went off into this beautiful space, and but I'm like, actually, over time. But yeah, I mean, if you feel called to come back and talk more, I would love for you to come back, because this is so interesting. It's so amazing. What
Absolutely.
you do. What you do, and like just. I'm just taking everything in, because I'm just like, wow. Celeste, so obviously you do ceremonies, they need to be in person, they can't be like online things. Right. Yeah. So if if people want to find out more about ceremonies that you do, or just find out more about you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so I'm currently taking a break from Instagram. I'm actually getting ready to facilitate a retreat, a women's retreat. It's the Serpent and the Rose. And so we're weaving sacred plant medicine, ayahuasca, with the divine feminine, or my website, 𝐂𝐤𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿. And but I'll be back on Instagram soon. And so reaching out to me via message or email, it's celeste@celestepalmercoaching.com. And I offer they're containers. So my work really focuses on the experience at large, and how to effectively and responsibly, in active participation, engage with ayahuasca for lasting change and for real change. And so again, it's a collaborative experience. And so I've been guided to create the Serpent and the Rose experience, which is a women's container, where we do both one-on-one and group work in preparation to the ceremonies, as well as one-on-one and group work and integration after the ceremonies. And so I'm getting ready to host the second edition. The retreat will be at the end of February, and then I'll be opening up enrollment for the third edition, which will take place sometime in the next, we'll see. I'm not sure when the retreat's going to be, maybe the fall, but it'll really depend on who arrives.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Celeste. I'll have all your details in the show notes. I just want to ask you one last question, and that is, what's setting your soul on fire?
Yeah, it's always ayahuasca. But it's just a deeper understanding of, and in relationship to the divine feminine. And so I'm really starting to connect with ayahuasca in this way, like the divine mother, the divine grandmother, and entering into ceremony as the ceremony. It's the womb space. Ceremony takes place at night in darkness. And there is a death so that a rebirth can take place. And I see this just in perfect correlation. It just seems so clear to me now that ayahuasca, at least in the way that I have been guided to facilitate this medicine, is to create a container to facilitate that death, that necessary death, so that we can be reborn in the womb of the divine mother.
Mm. Thank you so much. That is beautiful. I've just
Thank
so
you.
loved our conversation. And I know that, whenever I'm ready for an ayahuasca experience, I'll be taking myself to America to find you.
I'm waiting for you whenever it
Yeah.
aligns.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. And like I said, I would love for you to come back and talk more about, all the amazing things that you do. Thank you so much,
That would be
Celeste.
lovely. Thank you, 𝐂𝐞𝐥𝐿. It was so good to talk to you and connect again. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you.